We are a people that follow after those things that make for peace, love, and unity. It is our desire that others' feet may walk in the same. We do deny and bear our testimony against all strife and wars and contention.
In the 1700s, Ohio was a wilderness inhabited primarily by Native American tribes. By the end of the Revolutionary War, it was incorporated into the United States as part of the Northwest Territory. Now, there had been land disputes in Kentucky and Tennessee when they were settled, so it was decided to survey Ohio before the bulk of settlers arrived there. The easternmost part of Ohio was surveyed into 7 north to south ranges, and each range was divided into 36 square mile townships containing 1 mile square sections. By 1800, the land was ready to be sold to settlers. Thomas Beals, Quaker minister, came to Ohio in 1775 to visit Indian tribes. He was much impressed with the land, and it was written that, quote, he saw with his spiritual eye the seed of friends scattering all over that good land, and that one day there would be a greater gathering of friends than in any other place in the world. The Northwest Ordinance of 1784 stated that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, was ever to be permitted in the Northwest Territory. This had a great appeal to many Quakers who had a testimony against slavery, particularly those living in southern states where they were witness to this abominable practice. Redstone Quarterly Meeting in western Pennsylvania was established by Baltimore Yearly Meeting in 1798, and this became a funnel from which much of Quakerism moved into Ohio. The Great Migration. There were 4 main roads, or more like trails, to get to Ohio in the early 1800s. Forbes Road, once a packhorse trail that went from Philadelphia through Lancaster, Carlisle, and Bedford, Pennsylvania, and over the mountains to Pittsburgh. Braddock's Road, or the Cumberland Road, from Baltimore along the Potomac, then north and west to Pittsburgh or Wheeling. Part of it had been cleared for General Braddock's army in the 1700s. Much of this later became U.S. Route 40, the National Road. Wilderness Road. Perhaps the oldest route west, it was established by Daniel Boone. It was an ancient Indian path just above Harper's Ferry, following the Shenandoah Valley down to Cumberland Gap and then up through Kentucky to western Ohio. Genesee Road. The northern route, across New York State, along the Genesee River, and west to northern Ohio. Part of the journey was often made by river. Quakers living in the southern states had difficulty reconciling their beliefs with regard to slavery with those of their neighbors who refused to acknowledge the human rights of Negro slaves. Friends were recognized as one of the earliest groups in America to denounce the evils of slavery. The following quote from the 1819 Ohio Yearly Meeting Book of Discipline demonstrates this. As a religious society, we have found it to be our indispensable duty to declare to the world our belief of the repugnancy of slavery to the Christian religion. In relation to this oppressed people, we earnestly desire that such of them as may be under the care of any of our members may be treated with kindness and as objects of common salvation, instructed in the principles of the Christian religion, as well as such branches of school learning as may fit them for freedom and to become useful members of civil society. With this in mind, it is not surprising that many Southern Quakers made the journey to Ohio. For example, the entirety of Trent Meeting in Jones County, North Carolina, decided to move, along with some members of Coruscant Meeting in Carroll County, North Carolina. Certificates of membership removal addressed to Westland Quarter were granted to all members of Trent, after which there was no longer a Trent monthly meeting. Isaac Hull from Perquimans County, North Carolina, moved his family to Ohio, the trip taking 2 months, starting in 5th month, 1805. He left a journal of the trip, which he wrote in part, "5th month, 30th, 1805. Came through Petersburg and Pocahontas and Osbontown, and came about 27 miles, within about 7 of Richmond. Spent 5 shillings. 5th month, 31st. Came through Manchester and Revelmond. Came about 27 miles to James Stanley. Stayed all night and spent 9 shillings. The next day, got our horses shod and went about 12 miles and spent 16 shillings. Their destination was about 3 miles west of where Barnesville now stands, and probably took them 4 or 5 more days. They traveled in wagons, carts, and horseback, carrying with them their household goods and driving their livestock before them. Carts were the preferred mode of transportation because they were easier to move around trees and in the mountains. Meetings in Redstone Quarter in western Pennsylvania welcomed them and gave them advice regarding their purchase of land in Ohio. In 1800, near present Colerain, 6 miles up a small stream that empties into the Ohio River, some of the first settlers held their first meeting for worship on forest logs. The meeting was named Concord and eventually became a full monthly meeting. By the end of 1800, there were estimated 800 families of Friends in eastern Ohio. Many settled in Belmont, Jefferson, Guernsey, and Harrison counties. Salem in Columbiana County was settled in 1801 to 1802. Baltimore Yearly Meeting set off the meetings west of the Allegheny Mountains as Ohio Yearly Meeting in 1813. In 8th month of that year, Friends gathered at Short Creek for the first Ohio Yearly Meeting. Some accounts said there were nearly 2,000 in attendance, some coming from other yearly meetings. The women's meeting met in the meeting house, and the men sat on planks in the horse sheds. Those on the facing benches were not just preachers. They were skilled farmers, craftsmen, and businessmen who somehow found the time to go to meeting twice a week, spend many days attending special meetings, or following the mysterious inward light which led them to leave home and minister in other places. Plans were made and funds raised for a large yearly meeting house, which was built at Mount Pleasant in 1816. The first Ohio Yearly Meeting Book of Discipline was published in 1819. The following excerpt is from that discipline. We are engaged not only to meet together for the worship of God, but also for the exercise of a Christian care over each other, for the preservation of all in unity of faith and practice, answerable to the description which he, the ever-blessed shepherd, gave his flock. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. John 13:35. By 1826, Ohio Yearly Meeting had 43 Quaker meetings in Ohio with a total of 7,940 members, plus Redstone Quarterly Meeting in Pennsylvania with 927 members. At this time, the area being settled was nearly all forested, with many hills, valleys, and streams, a primitive, unspoiled wonder of nature. However, to a new resident who had the task of clearing a section of land from the dense forest, the beauties of nature may have appeared less appealing. Education. As early as 1814, the subject of education for the youth of our society was mentioned, and then deferred, although several monthly meetings had primary schools before that. In 1824, Thomas Roach left $5,000 to Ohio Yearly Meeting for a school, and plans were begun in 1827 for the building of a boarding school. However, the next year was the year of the Hicksite separation. It wasn't until 1832 that the committee had made definite plans for the school. They reported, quote, "We believe the Ohio Yearly Meeting boarding school must be calculated for a finishing school for both sexes. It will therefore be necessary that the two departments should be entirely distinct and separate from each other." Unquote. Mount Pleasant Boarding School opened on the 23rd of first month, 1837, with 85 students. At the same time, monthly and quarterly meetings were requested to establish primary schools for the education of their children. By 1840, 100 such schools had been established, with 1,595 children attending. Some of these schools were in family homes. A number of difficulties were encountered. Among these were there were not enough schools, families not being able to afford the cost of friend schools, and the fact that qualified teachers were scarce. An increasing number of Friends families were sending their children to public schools. As a result, many of the Quaker schools were discontinued, and by 1880 there were only 25 schools serving 343 children left. By 1955, there was only one meeting school left with 5 children in attendance. The Mount Pleasant boarding school continued in spite of divisions among Friends until 1874, when the school was awarded to the Gurneyite Friends by the Ohio Supreme Court. In 1899, Phoebe Steer wrote, quote, "In 6th month, 1874, Mount Pleasant School was taken from us. Friends felt so keenly and were so alive to our need of such an institution that they immediately went to work to collect funds and select a site for the new school. Such was the interest that work commenced in 11/10/1847 on the site of the present boarding school near Barnesville, Ohio." Unquote. The new school was called Friends Boarding School, and it opened first month 3rd, 1876. After the work was finished on the school, a new Ohio Yearly Meeting House was constructed on the site of Stillwater Monthly Meeting House, adjacent to the school property. Later, the school took the name of Olney from a poem written by Lewis Tabor. Ohio Yearly Meeting Schisms. The Society of Friends divided into two organizations in the year 1827 to 1830. The division was caused by disagreements over the ministry of Elias Hicks, one of the more liberal Quaker ministers. In ninth month, 1828, Ohio Yearly Meeting assembled at Mount Pleasant. Because there was not enough room inside for all attenders, doorkeepers kept out non-members, which included many disowned Hicksites. A group of Hicksites broke into the building, walked down the aisle, and threw Jonathan Taylor, the men's clerk, out of the door behind the clerk's desk and took over the meeting. Thus began the division between Hicksites and Orthodox, both claiming to be Ohio Yearly Meeting. Another division took place in 1854 between the followers of Joseph John Gurney and John Wilbur. John Gurney promoted an evangelical position, repudiating the inward light and regarding the only basis for religious truth to be the Bible. John Wilbur was supporting the side of the conservative or Orthodox members. From 1854 until 1877, three rival yearly meetings met at Mount Pleasant Meeting House in different weeks. After the Supreme Court decision, the Wilburites decided to build a boarding school and a new meeting house near Barnesville. In 1878, they met in their new meeting house east of Barnesville. In the book, A Brief History of Ohio Yearly Meeting Conservative, Charles Moreland writes, quote, "We cannot help but feel that one of the underlying reasons that caused dissension in the early history of the society was the lack of respect for the feelings of others and a desire to ignore consideration of what they were trying to express." Unquote. Charles Moreland supports his assertion with a number of anecdotes, the first of which he describes this way, quote, "This brings to mind the very tactful reply of a much beloved and useful member of the yearly meeting. One first day afternoon, a prominent minister felt called upon to give quite a lengthy dissertation that impressed some as being somewhat tiresome. Following the meeting, a group were expressing their feeling in regards to this particular discourse. While others were expressing themselves, Carl Patterson stood there without taking part in the conversation. Someone said to him that he had not expressed his feelings. In his quiet and loving way, he said, "All the time he was speaking, I prayed that the Lord might bless his communication to somebody's good." We felt his reply showed the true Christian spirit. End quote. Charles Moreland relates another anecdote. Quote, "We very much regret a number of things that happened during and following the separations, and many of them show a lack of the right spirit." In connection with such a lack of a loving spirit, we are reminded of a saintly woman who lived in our community and was always able to say something good about others when those about her were saying unkind things. One day, a neighbor came in with a choice bit of gossip, which she freely told. After she finished, our saintly lady made some pleasant remark about the person. Her neighbor became quite peeved and said, "I think thee could say something good about the devil himself." In a quiet way, the good woman said, "I do not know, but we should all admire his perseverance." Elbert Russell, in his History of Quakerism, wrote, quote, "They lost sight of the fact that love is the essence of Christianity and considered something else more important than patience, forbearance, unity, mutual respect, cooperation, and love." Unquote. In spite of the strong feelings for the separation, many people were actively involved in avoiding a division in 1828. Some notable ministers in Ohio Yearly Meeting Friends. Howard Horton, 1770 to 1833, investigated Ohio lands for North Carolina Friends and was the first Ohio Yearly Meeting men's clerk. Jonathan Taylor, 1768 to 1831, advocate for both Native and African Americans, Ohio Yearly Meeting men's clerk in 1828 during the Hicksite Division. Benjamin Hoyle, 1797 to 1875, traveling minister and men's Ohio Yearly Meeting clerk, 1838 to 1858, clerk during the Gurneyite separation. Anne Branson, 1808 to 1891, leading women's minister in the mid-1800s from Flushing Monthly Meeting. During the Civil War, she struggled with feeling the suffering on the battlefields. Barclay Stratton, 1829 to 1892, served as superintendent during the transition from Mount Pleasant to Barnesville boarding school. James Edgerton, 1828 to 1905, farmer and fruit grower. He shipped the first bushel of strawberries to Chicago and established a market for fruit in that city, thus contributing to Barnesville earning the title of Strawberry Capital of the World. James also brought the first Jersey cattle west of the Allegheny Mountains. His work with cattle introduced a profitable industry for many years in Belmont County. Asenath Patterson Bailey, 1820 to 1905, a Stillwater minister who traveled to Iowa and Ohio prisons. Her advice and gospel ministry to such was always timely and direct, offending none, but, we believe, leading many to better lives. Elisha Gray, 1835 to 1901, inventor of the first telephonic transmitting device, although Graham Bell got the first patent and is generally given credit for that invention. Elisha also made many improvements in the telegraph and telephone industries, including the invention of a forerunner of the modern fax machine. J. Wetherall Hutton, 1866 to 1943, teacher, principal, and superintendent at Olney from 1908 to 1935. He was very active with the Peace Committee. James Henderson, 1859 to 1942, minister who met with President Wilson regarding peace in the military. In 1920, after World War I, he went on a 6-month journey through war-torn Europe. Louis J. Tabor, 1878 to 1960, master of the National Grange for 18 years, Ohio's first Secretary of Agriculture and advisor to Presidents Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. William J. Tabor, 1927 to 2005, Stillwater minister, only teacher and principal, author of The Eye of Faith and other Quaker publications. Ohio Yearly Meeting in the 20th century. The Halfway Picnic was started in 1917. This was a summer conference and social event held for many years halfway between Barnesville and Salem. It originally was held at Harlem Springs and later at Jewett. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, the draft law provided an exemption from combat service but not military service. Conscientious objectors were sent to military camps, where many experienced abuse, humiliation, and brutal treatment. Those refusing to register were sent to prison. In 1922, the discipline was republished with minor changes. At the suggestion of the Meeting for Sufferings in 1924, the Ohio Yearly Meeting appointed 5 friends to constitute the fiduciary trustees of Ohio Yearly Meeting, which was later incorporated under the laws of Ohio. The movement to establish a peace committee began during World War I with a service committee, but that was laid down after the war ended. For several years there was a concern to have a peace committee, and it was finally officially established in 1928. 1926 saw the beginning of the Young Friends Conference. This was a summer conference on Olney campus for young Ohio Yearly Meeting friends. It didn't meet during World War II due to travel restrictions and was started back up in 1946 and lasted through the 1950s. During World War II, many Ohio Yearly Meeting young friends were conscientious objectors. As in World War I, some young friends served in the military as non-combatants. Unlike World War I, there was also alternative service, such as volunteering for scientific experiments as human guinea pigs. Other alternative service included fire jumping or simply working on government projects. In 1944, Walton Home for the Aged was established. It opened with 5 occupants. In 1950, the first joint sessions of Ohio Yearly Meeting men and women were held. Also in that year, 45 Quakers, uncomfortable with the growing military in the U.S., established a community in the mountains of Costa Rica. They were attracted to this country by its farm potential, climate, and the fact that the country did not have a military. In 1965, the Quaker Heritage Room was established to preserve Yearly Meeting history. It contains artifacts, including a collection of rare Quaker books. 1966 was the year of the first Conservative Friends gathering. In 1976, the first Christian education camp was held at Olney. In 1997, the Friends Center was established. This is a conference center intended as an outreach of the Christian unprogrammed Quakerism of Ohio Yearly Meeting. In 1999, Ohio Yearly Meeting turned over management of Olney to an independent board of directors made up largely of Olney alumni. To the beginning of the 21st century. And it is fitting to end with this quote from the Ohio Yearly Meeting Discipline of 1819. Collectively and individually, may all our meetings be held with weight as in the immediate presence of the head of the church. May the aged among us be examples of every Christian virtue and evince by the calmness of their evening that their day has been blessed. May the middle-aged not faint in their stations, but, together with their elder and younger brethren, firmly support, yea, exalt the several testimonies which we are called to maintain. And oh, may the beloved youth bend early and cheerfully under the forming power of truth, that each standing in his allotment, the harmony of the building may be preserved, and we truly grow up in a holy temple for the Lord.
We are a people that follow after those things that make for peace, love, and unity. It is our desire that others' feet may walk in the same. We do deny and bear our testimony against all strife and wars and contention. We are a people that follow after those things that make for peace, love, and unity. It is our desire that others' feet may walk in the same. We do deny and bear our testimony against all strife and wars and contention.